everybody, Amy here with Garden Up Landscape. Today I want to talk about preparing for disasters. That's not usually the subject of my channel, but I will come back around to gardening in the end. So make sure to watch the video all the way to the end, hit the like button while you're at it, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss future videos. I am planning a big series on vegetable gardening, so if you are interested in food security, then trust me, you don't want to miss that. In light of the recent COVID-19 pandemic, it has become apparent just how necessary it is to be prepared for just about anything. It has also become very apparent just how severely unprepared the average person is and how clueless people become when they start panic buying their supplies. When is the next time we're going to see a roll of toilet paper in the store? My husband and I have been prepping for about 7 years. There always seems to be some event or stimulus that makes people wake up and realize that things may not be as they seem. For us, it was the Sandy Hook Newtown shooting. If you're watching this video, then yours might be the COVID-19 pandemic. Whatever the event is that makes you realize it, you should be prepared for disasters. So I want to share a few things that I've learned over the years about getting started prepping. Types of disasters, what to have on hand, long-term survival, stuff like that, so that you'll have a place to start and you'll know what questions to ask to further your own research. When this started, my husband and I went through our emergency storage just to check on what we had and what we should probably restock on. Going through our recipes, we found that we needed powdered milk and yeast. Everything else was pretty much covered. I thought that finding powdered milk and yeast right now would be like searching for a needle in a haystack, with everybody panic buying everything in the store, shelves are empty, where am I going to find that? So I went to Winco and I asked an associate if they had it in stock and where I might find it. She said if it's still here, it would be in the baking aisle. Okay, great. Went to the baking aisle, picked clean, empty shelves from one end to the other, except for a couple of things. Canola oil, powdered milk, and yeast. Right there on the shelves. There was nothing else. There was no sugar, there was no flour, there were no cake mixes, nothing. But powdered milk was there, a whole case of it untouched. Yeast was there. Now, I'm not saying that those two items are essential for everybody and that's all you'll need in a disaster. Quite the contrary, and I'll come back to that later. But I do find it interesting that two key items for preparing food from long-term storage were virtually untouched by these frantic shoppers. So I'm doing this video as a public service announcement to the world at large about how to prepare for a disaster before a disaster happens. It may be a little late at this point to prepare for this disaster, but better late than never, and at least you can get ready before the next one. I also want to say a couple words about why it's a good idea to prepare for disasters ahead of time. I'm going to get into some scenarios and talk about some things in this video that might seem a little bit outlandish, maybe even a little crazy. You're going to think, well, why is that kind of stuff necessary? And it may not be. In our current disaster of a virus that's gone completely global, and it's a pandemic where we're locked down in our houses, there's no widespread chaos really, except for people hoarding toilet paper. You're not really in any grave danger as long as you stay home and wear a mask when you're out. No big deal. But in other disasters, that may not be the case. So again, focus on which disaster you are preparing for and what kind of situation might actually be happening, what kind of societal issues might be going on. If people are raiding stores and burning buildings and doing all kinds of stuff because it's utter chaos, then you're going to need more provisions, most likely, than if it's a viral pandemic and you're told to stay in your home and watch Netflix all day. So first you need to know what kind of disaster you are preparing for so that you have a baseline of what kind of things you'll need. If you live on a fault line, you'll probably be preparing for an earthquake. If you live on a prairie, think about tornadoes. Floodplain or a coast, probably floods and hurricanes. You could even be concerned about tyrannical government takeover, or hyperinflation, or an actual zombie apocalypse. Whatever gets you excited. So pick one and think about how you would prepare for that one. There are endless disasters you could choose from, and it's impractical to try to prepare for everything, so just pick one to start. Then you will need a plan of action. Will you bug out or bug in? If you bug out, where will you go? How will you get there? You can't always count on roads being open, especially in a disaster. So you need several alternative routes planned. Is it defendable? If you bug in, which is essentially what we're all doing right now, is your home defendable? What's your backup plan if that doesn't work? Once you know where you'll go in a disaster, then you can start stocking supplies. So, prepping 101! If you were to get serious about prepping and started researching doomsday preppers, you might come across this little rule of thumb. It's really useful for deciding what's most important and what's most urgent. And that is the rule of threes. You have 3 seconds to protect yourself, 3 minutes to administer medical aid, 3 hours to find shelter, 3 days to find water, and 3 weeks to find food. Let's break that down. 3 seconds to protect yourself means that if you are attacked, you essentially have 3 seconds, if you're lucky, to react. For most preppers, this means having a firearm and ammunition, a knife or 2, and being able to fight with your body. If you politically lean anti-gun, I don't know what to tell you here. Learn how to fight with what you have available. But good luck bringing your fists to a gunfight. I also need to be very clear here. Just having a weapon isn't enough. You must know how to use it properly, safely, and legally. You need to learn everything about it and practice, practice, practice. You need to be comfortable with your weapons, including if your weapon is your own fists. You also need to know the laws in your area so that you can do everything legally. You can usually look up your local laws on your city's website. And I'll say it again. You need to practice. Go to a shooting range and do some target shooting. Now, training to put holes in paper is only half the battle. Learn how to draw your weapon from its holster. Learn how to do admin and emergency reloads. How to clear a malfunction. Do close-range shooting drills. Weapon retention, so nobody can take it from you. One-hand firing. Offhand firing. Etc. If you don't learn how to use your weapon, you are only preparing for your enemy to take it. Also, don't get hung up on buying all of the right gear. And there is no substitute for a good teacher. And did I say practice? Practice. 3 minutes to administer medical first aid. If you are injured, whether because you're in a fight or just because life happens, you have about 3 minutes to administer first aid. Obviously, this is dependent on what kind of wound you have, but this is a general rule of thumb here. Blood loss is the #1 cause of death in the battlefield, so at a minimum, you should have a proper tourniquet and know how to use it. That will keep you alive long enough to get to someone who knows what they're doing to help. I won't get into what all of the medical supplies are that you need to buy, but I will say again, just like with your weapon, having all of the supplies is not enough. You need to know how to use them, and you need to practice and be comfortable knowing what to do with them. Don't bother buying a tourniquet if you don't know what a tourniquet is or how to use it. Now, you have 3 hours to find shelter. Again, this is a rule of thumb. You might have a little more than 3 hours, you might have a little less. It depends on what time of the day it is, what the seasons are like right now. If you are displaced from your shelter right before sundown in January, you might not have 3 hours. The point is that you need to find a suitable shelter to protect yourself from the elements in a short amount of time. The most basic shelter is your clothes. Make sure that you are dressed appropriately and that you have additional dry clothes for any changes of weather or season. If bugging in, do you have a source of heat? If bugging out, does your retreat location have shelter and heat? While traveling, a car is an excellent shelter if you have good clothes and sleeping bags. Also, tools and skills are often more important than an actual physical structure. If you have the right tools and skills, then you can build and get everything else. If you are bugging in, then maybe shelter is already covered. But again, what if you get displaced? Where will you go? Do you know how to make a shelter out of branches and sticks? That's more of a skill to learn than a supply to buy, but you can obviously purchase a tent and other camping gear, but will you be able to transport it and set it up? If you have a big family of 5 and you need to buy a giant 2-bedroom tent to house everybody, you're not going to just sling that on your back with all your other camping gear and hike up a mountain to find a place to pitch it. Alright, 3 days to find water. Did you know that you can survive for a few days without drinking any water? You can, but only days. And as far as long-term survival goes, water is pretty important. But you can't just drink water from any source. You really need to find a source of clean drinking water. So in preparing for a disaster, you'll want to have a filtration and purification system. Excuse me. Also, higher levels of activity will require more water. 3 days is assuming you're sitting still in a life raft. If you're trekking across the country to your bug out retreat, you'll need a lot more water. The same is true about food. Once again, I'm not going to get into the details of what kind of supplies you need to filter water and whatnot, but now you at least know some questions to ask and you can start doing some Googling. 3 weeks to find food. It seems rather ironic to me that food is the last thing on the list of things that you need to buy to be prepared for a disaster. But it's the first thing that people flock to the stores and clear out the shelves of whenever a disaster happens. And that's not just in the movies, it happens in real life. It's happening right now. When a disaster is announced, people clear out the stores of everything on the shelves. Yet, of all the things that you need for survival, food is actually the least urgent. It's the last thing you need to worry about. You can survive for several weeks without a full meal. Now that being said, it's still important. As with the shelter, tools and skills are far more important than stores of consumable food. If you want to garden, then you're going to need the right tools. Same with canning and home repair. Tools can be far more valuable than consumable supplies. Okay. I am not going to get into the details on this, but I will cover some of the basics. You can do your own research on each of these ideas and figure out which one is best for your family. Food prep can be covered in a lot of different ways. One of those ways is copy canning. This is a great way to amass a large store of food that will last for several years without breaking your budget to do so. Basically, when you're at the store buying your regular groceries and you have 1 can of beans on your list, instead of just buying 1 can, you buy 2. One of them is to eat now, the other one goes in your long-term stores. Now, obviously, you will rotate through these so that as you buy more, you still are using your oldest ones first. But you will start to grow your pantry and actually have a good-sized store of food. You can use this technique to purchase extra canned goods, extra dry goods like flour, sugar, and pasta, and you can even use it to buy paper products. But I will note that toilet paper is not essential for survival. It is good to have some on hand, though. Just saying. Homesteading and vegetable gardening. And here we come around to what my channel is actually about. I am planning on a series of vegetable gardening videos this year, so again, if that's something you're interested in, please remember to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you won't miss an episode. Homesteading is when you turn your house into a food-producing, hopefully to some degree, self-sufficient property. You can have gardens, you can keep animals like chickens and goats, you can have fruit trees, you can do just about anything you want with your little piece of land. If you live in an apartment and only have a small balcony, then you may grow food in containers, or if you have a limited space, you might learn some space-saving gardening techniques or grow vertically on walls. You've got to use what you've got. Don't wait for your circumstances to be perfect before you start prepping or start gardening. Use what you've got and start now. And just like all of the previous items on this list, the best thing to do is practice. Don't wait until you have that perfect plot of acreage out in the country. Get a flower pot and grow a tomato. Buy some seeds and get started. Food preservation and home canning. Learning to preserve food is a tried and true method of survival that our ancestors have been using for hundreds and thousands of years. And it's something that our recent generations have completely forgotten how to do. Without grocery stores, most of us would simply starve to death. So it's time to sit down with Grandma, after this is all over and at a safe distance from each other, and learn some of our nearly forgotten skills. Long-term food storage. In addition to copy canning and home canning and food preservation, you should have some stores of dry goods that will last upwards of 20 or more years. That way you don't have to worry about using them before they go bad and having to restock them all over again. There are several canneries online that you can find that'll sell big number 10 cans of dry goods that will last 20 years or more. And make sure you read the suggested recipes and have the other ingredients on hand so that you can actually use them. This is the very last thing that you need to worry about acquiring in order to prepare for a disaster. It's also a good idea to note that you should not stock up on something if you don't know how to use it. For example, if you don't know how to use powdered milk, then don't buy it. Or you could learn how to use it before needing that knowledge. A couple last thoughts before I end the video are the difference between a prepper and a survivalist and how to find like-minded people. A prepper is someone who prepares for a disaster by storing up supplies. Mostly they stock up on ammunition, medical supplies, water, and food long before a disaster ever strikes. They usually have a shelter, and that is where they store all of their things. They are often laughed at as eccentrics, but they do have the right idea about how to be prepared in case a disaster ever strikes. The problems with just being a prepper are that you might have all the supplies in the world, but can you get to them? Do you know how to use them? What if you prepared for the wrong kind of disaster? The next level of prepping is called survivalism. Survivalists are folks that may also have stores of food and supplies, but really what they want to stock up on is knowledge. They will spend their time learning and practicing skills like how to use their weapons and medical supplies, how to filter water, how to grow a garden, reap a harvest, and preserve the produce. Survivalists are much more interested in acquiring the skills to get the things they need than on stocking up on things ahead of time. After all, the things they stocked may not be the things they need, or they might have to relocate and they can't take those things with them. Both levels of disaster preparations are important and useful. If you really want to get serious about survival, then it's useful to find a group of people near you that you can meet with and learn from. Fair warning though, people that are in the prepping communities tend to be very eclectic. Folks that prep often pay a lot of attention to current world events and what's really going on behind the scenes. All different levels of conspiracy theories, etc. And when you understand what's really going on, it can be kind of hard to keep a level head. So you will meet all kinds of folks in these groups, and I mean all kinds. But there are some truly wonderful people in prepping communities that are happy to help people like you get started. They understand that the more people that are prepared for a disaster, the fewer people will be swarming the grocery stores and frantic and panicking for supplies. And that means the better off and safer the world will be when a disaster does strike. Well, that's all I've got for you on Disaster Prepping 101. Now you have enough knowledge to ask the right questions and do your own research so that you can be better prepared for the next disaster. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell, and I will see you next time.